How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
Hi, I'm Ian Hanomansing in Vancouver on this Thursday evening. A special edition of Cross Country Checkup is live.
Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
Our question today, what is your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Our number is 888-416-8333. 888-416-8333.
You claim to be very different from Mr. Trudeau. Now, the point is to show that you are any better than Mr. Trudeau.
Fundamentally, I'm the only person on stage that not only fought for real relief for people in terms of affordability, I'm the only one that fought for pharmacare.
Many people are describing this federal election as the most important in decades, and tonight's debate could be a pivotal moment. The Liberals have been leading in the polls for weeks with virtually no change, and tonight may be the last significant opportunity for the leaders to win your vote. Our question, what's your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? 888-416-8333 is our number. We'd especially like to hear from you if tonight's debate helped you decide who to vote for or changed your mind. And did any of the party leaders surprise you? If you'd like to share comments or appear on Checkup tonight, you can also go to cbc.ca/aircheck. I'm Ian Hanomansing in Vancouver. We're live on CBC Radio. This is Cross Country Checkup. Your voice, Canada's voice. Okay, we have lots of people on the phones already. So what I'm going to do tonight is have a little different pace than we do on a normal checkup. And that is to get through a lot of calls quickly. And Shachi Curl is going to join us as well, the president of the Angus Reid Institute. And so she'll give us her perspective on the debate, her analysis. But let's start with some callers. And Carly Hall is in Fergus, Ontario. Hi, Carly.
Hi.
What did you think of the debate?
I was really looking forward to this one, and I think it kind of solidified my vote. I know.
I'll tell you what, Carly, we're having a little trouble with your phone line. I guess you're probably on a mobile phone. So what I'm going to do is disconnect with you, and our control room is going to try to reach you again, and we'll come back to you, I hope. So let's go to the next call. Eaton Ziner Cohen, who's in Toronto. Hi, Eaton.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Did you watch all the full 2 hours?
I did, and last night's debate as well.
Okay, so what did you think?
To be entirely candid with you, I thought that Pierre Poilievre was incontrovertibly and unequivocally the conclusive winner of the debate tonight in just about every facet that was contested. I actually believe it was so axiomatically self-evident that it's impossible to derive any other conclusion from what I just saw. And I was watching very carefully. I came in not entirely certain about who I was going to be voting for, but I don't just think that Pierre spoke like a prime minister. I think he actually embodied what a prime minister should be with the totality of his being, soul and sinew. He didn't just look the part; he was the part.
So Eaton, you're saying that you don't sound like somebody who came into this evening undecided. So who might you have voted for other than Pierre Poilievre before the debate?
Well, I think the only other option would have been Mark Carney, but I found his performance to be quite abysmal. I thought it was lacking in substance. I didn't hear him provide a single meaningful answer. I certainly have tried to do my research to the best of my abilities. And that being said, I was really watching tonight to have a directive that I could take away from this debate. And that was given to me, patently and overwhelmingly.
All right, Eaton, thank you very much for your call. Carly is back on the line. She is in Fergus, Ontario. And I hope, Carly, that our connection's a little bit better. So tell me what you thought of the debate.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Awesome. I love the debate. I was really excited for this one. I think overall I'm just kind of more certain about my choice. At the end of the day, I was looking to see who I felt could handle our current situation with the U.S. From a point of strength. And I think the only thing that I would have liked to hear more about is maybe the other. I know Mark Carney has spoken about it throughout the campaign and a little bit tonight, but just a little bit more about how the other parties view Canada and its relationship with the other countries, especially with Europe, and maybe bridging out new relationships in Europe as well.
Did anything you hear tonight change your view of any of the leaders?
I don't think so, no. If anything, I think I came away not thinking as critically maybe about the Conservative Party. I do agree with some of the stances. However, mostly I kind of lean Liberal. But yeah, I think this one was really hard. I know it's very, very close with the two parties, but overall, I think I'm leaving not being as critical to Conservatives.
So have you made up your mind who you're going to vote for?
Yep, 100%. I'm really excited. I plan to go out to vote tomorrow, so I'm hoping everyone else gets a chance to go out to the polls too as well.
And you know the rules of the game here. You don't have to disclose anything you don't want to disclose, but I can ask you, who are you going to vote for?
Yeah, I'm going to go Liberal. To be honest with you, if Trudeau had stayed, it would have been Conservative all the way. Yeah. But I feel very confident with Mark Carney and the work that he's done so far. So excited to see what he can do to turn around the Liberal Party.
Okay, Carly, thank you very much. You're listening to a special election debate edition of Cross Country Checkup. I'm Ian Hanomansing. We're live at Studio 10 in Vancouver. And our number, if you would like to tell us what you consider the debate highlight or whether there's an issue that got too much attention or didn't get enough attention, is 888-416-8333. You can also go to cbc.ca/aircheck. Dante Sostre Del Mundo is in Ottawa. Hi, Dante.
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
What did you think of the debate?
Yeah, I thought the debate was pretty standard. I think the most interesting part for me was definitely crime and safety. I grew up in urban areas. I grew up in London, Ontario. I grew up in Ottawa, and I think, in terms of the different party platforms, I think crime is definitely where they're actually different. I mean, I think the U.S. issue is quite important, but I mean, every party will obviously be strong against the United States. I think is a pretty free layup in that regard. But I do think there's quite a lot of different perspectives in crime punishment, and I feel like the thing is they kind of just focus on fentanyl going down south. Like everyone kind of can see that's a good idea to put more border guards down at the border where fentanyl comes, which is true. But the thing is that fentanyl on the streets is much more, nuanced than the fact there's fentanyl, right? A lot of these people who are on the streets suffer from severe, systemic reasons on why they can't, get off the streets, for example.
Dante, let me just say your phone quality isn't great. So why don't I just ask you one more quick question and a quick answer? Pierre Poilievre, for sure, has made public safety and crime a big issue, and he talked about that tonight. So did he win your vote tonight?
I don't think he did. I just don't think focusing on these big ticket, big sentences is going to solve anything. It looks like starting from the root. It looks like looking at housing. It looks like social services. And I don't think Pierre Poilievre's, promise of shutting down safe injection sites or cutting against social housing is going to solve anything in that regard.
So now you're starting to sound like you might be an NDP supporter. Have you made up your mind, and did the debate have any impact on you making up your mind?
Yeah, I was sitting between the Liberals and NDP heading into the debate, and I was also thinking of third parties around my area, I was thinking of the Greens or some independent candidates in my riding, but I'm pretty confident in NDP's platform in terms of it looks like getting the support first. It looks like social services. Yeah. And I think that's the right way to go. Okay,
Dante, thank you very much for calling. This is Cross Country Checkup. We are live, and you can take part in our program as we talk about tonight's leaders' debate. What was your highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? 888-416-8333 is our number, and we are getting, as you would expect, lots of calls. But let me bring in The guest I have in studio with me, Shachi Kurl, is president of the Angus Reid Institute, and she'll be with us for the remainder of the show to weigh in on the debate and also on your calls. And Shachi, one of the great things about having you in the studio, besides all the interesting analysis, is being able to read the reaction to the callers on your face. And so, and you were emoting big time as you heard our first three callers. But rather than ask you to weigh in on that, let me start by asking you, and you're somebody who, as a journalist, as a pollster, and as a moderator, have watched and paid a lot of attention to a lot of debates. What did you think about tonight?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me in. Great to be with you. Great to be on tonight, and great to hear from the callers as you go through the experiences of moderating debates, including the last federal debate. So, in terms of all of that, I watched for the last 2 hours very carefully, and I think it's really important. I wear, as you very, very thoroughly pointed out, I wear a couple different hats in my career. But if I'm wearing my pollster hat, there's what my gut tells me, but you always wait for the data to come in, right? You always wait to hear from Canadians before presupposing what you think. I think that's really important. But I would frankly be surprised if tonight's conversation or even last night's conversation shifted a lot of votes. I think if you are somebody who's been largely checked out of the campaign to this point, the last two nights were a very good and thorough primer on the broad issues that have already been canvassed at length. If you're someone who's been paying even a little bit of attention to this campaign over the last month, you didn't hear that much that was new. So it may have been a confirming experience for some voters who were still on the fence. I don't know that it shifted a lot of opinion. And I say that also based in the data that we have that shows that, you know, about a quarter of shaky or not totally locked in Liberal voters said that they were waiting for debate nights to make up their mind, and about the same proportion of Conservative uncommitted voters saying the same thing.
And from a polling perspective, what happens now? Are pollsters actually going to be on the phone this late in the evening, or will it be tomorrow? When will we start seeing the data?
Yes, great question. And as you know, and we've talked about this before, there's lots of different methodologies. So there's on the phone like we are tonight, but there's also different methodologies, including online. So yes, we can be into field as early as tonight, over the weekend. I think a really important thing for our audience to bear in mind is that we're all political junkies. Not everybody necessarily sat down. Think about the time zones. Not everybody sat down to watch this transfixed for 2 hours. So a lot of their interpretation of the debate will come from clips. It will come from the coverage. It will come from the editorials. So it's not just, did you watch the debate, but it's also, have you heard or read or seen anything? And that sometimes takes a couple, 3 days to start baking in, to start landing. And so I think we'll have a decent sense of what people came away with, if anything, by the end of the weekend.
And also, we have a long weekend here. Some people have 4 days off. A lot of people have 3 days off. And so among families at Easter dinner, you're going to have that kind of influence as well, right? That uncle who does all the talking at Easter dinner, and you kind of rely on him to interpret politics. Well, he's going to be. I hope I'm not that uncle, because I do have nieces. But anyway,
he's going to have hashtag all the opinions.
Yeah, that's right. Listen, speaking, you make a really good point, of course, about people who, especially in Alberta and British Columbia, because of the time the debate was on, 4 or 5 o'clock, depending on whether you're in the Pacific or Mountain Time Zone, may not even have seen or heard the debate. We're going to play some clips. I'm going to go through that with you as well. But before we do that, let's go back to the phones and take a couple of calls, and then we'll play some of the clips, Shachi, from the debate. Deborah Kormos is in Mississauga. Hi, Deborah.
Hello, Ian. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, nice
Hi.
to talk to you. Did you watch the full 2 hours?
I sure did. I stuck it out.
And so what did you think?
Well, I scripted it out because I didn't want to lose my train of thought. So
Okay.
let me just because I can talk faster than I can ramble.
Okay.
Trump has zero respect for Trudeau, but I'm hoping he has a different level of respect for the next leader coming in. If it's Carney, he's been governor twice. His resume is impressive. Trump is a businessman, never a politician. Carney is a businessman, never a politician. So same footing, but different successes. 10 years of Liberal track record is on Trudeau. I like how Mr. Singh stuck to keeping our plans if you vote for us. I think that's very important that he gets his foot in there with pharmacare, dental care. Poilievre, typical complaining, but also promoting, so I was impressed with him. And Mr. Carney, you could see the wheels turning, and you just couldn't embellish. You could just see the wheels turning in his head. He was getting a little frustrated. But he can't blow up just yet and say what he wants to say because he's not the leader yet. He's not prime minister.
So Deborah, well, I mean, he is prime minister, but you mean he hasn't won an election as prime minister?
Not won the election, that's correct.
So let me ask you, did you go into tonight already either sure of who you were going to vote for or pretty sure?
Oh, yes, and that leads to my next good point.
Okay.
My old boss, back in my 20s, her name was Judy Castleman. She's out there still. She taught me to always vote for the person, not the party. She says, if you like the person, no matter what party they represent, that's who you vote for. And it has stuck with me my whole life. So I voted for my current Liberal MP in my riding in Mississauga, Cooksville, because he's a great guy. And that's who I voted for. And we'll just see what happens.
Okay, Deborah, thank you very much for calling.
Thank you very much, Ian. You take care.
I will. This is Cross Country Checkup. Our number is 888-416-8333. Maureen Lees is in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. Hi, Maureen.
Hi there.
What did you think of the debate tonight?
It was good. I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that Pierre Poilievre actually, I believe in the pipeline. He believes in the pipeline. I think that's the one thing that can draw us together as a country, East and West. I think Mr. Blanchette would come on board with that. The crime across Canada is rampant.
In
and
Humboldt,
that
too?
needs to be put in check.
Is crime and safety an issue? In what way is it an issue in Humboldt?
We do see more people that are using drugs even in our small towns, and Saskatoon has a big problem right now with fentanyl. People are dropping like flies in that city. I know that for sure. They've had to close down some of their sites because of the workers being burnt out.
Yeah. Is there anything?
And I think that's in every city in Canada.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking about crime and safety, and then you mentioned fentanyl and deaths from drug poisonings, which I guess some people could see as a crime and safety issue, and some people see it as an addiction and health issue. So that's a decision, I guess, that may inform the way people vote. Before going into tonight, were you pretty sure who you were going to vote for?
Yes.
Yeah, and it sounds like that choice was Pierre Poilievre.
Yes.
Yeah, and so to what you saw tonight, it sounds like just seal the deal for you, Maureen. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
All right, let me read some of the online reaction we're getting. Francesco Coniglione reached us via cbc.ca/aircheck from Barry, saying, I especially appreciated seeing the leaders, particularly Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney, shake hands as fellow Canadians at the end. That's true, actually. A colleague of mine was surprised as well, and we spotted that, and they seemed to be getting along better together at the end of the debate than I would have thought. That said, Francesco writes, it's time for a change, and I believe Mr. Poilievre should be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Bennett from Edmonton on Aircheck says, I thought Mark Carney won the debate. Pierre kept repeating the same slogans he said throughout the election campaign. There was nothing new in his personality. I was hoping to see something more from Pierre that would feel like he was connecting with Canadians. And Raphael Capo from Mission, British Columbia, reached us via Aircheck to say, I voted Conservative ever since I was old enough to vote, but Poilievre has given very few reasons to actually trust him. This is a concern I've had even before Trump entered the equation in that regard. The debates haven't moved the needle. Let's go back to Shachi Kurl here on our program. And just a reminder, we are live right now on CBC Radio, and we're asking you about your debate highlight. 888-416-8333 is the number you can call to take part in the conversation. A name that came up a lot, Shachi, during this debate was Justin Trudeau. And I want to play an exchange between the Liberal leader and the Conservative leader on that.
It may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau. Focus is on results.
Were you his economic advisor?
Shachi, what do you make of not just that particular exchange, but also the shadow of Justin Trudeau on this debate?
One of the most remarkable things about this campaign, and Ian, we've talked about this before, it's not even this, it's not since the writs were issued. It was the 8 to 10 weeks since the beginning of the year, even before the campaign began, was the way so many people in this country, particularly center-left voters, were prepared to put Justin Trudeau very much in the rearview mirror and embrace Mark Carney. And we have asked this question of Canadians through the Angus Reid Institute and asked, look, does Carney represent a little bit of change, a lot of change? The numbers have been, at least as of earlier in the campaign, pretty remarkable in that people are prepared to look at Mark Carney as a fresh start. Now, what is the X factor right now? It's the fact that over the last several weeks, Pierre Poilievre and other members of the opposition, Jagmeet Singh, Mr. Blanchette, have made the case that it's more of the same. And, history tells us it would be not unheard of, but quite unique or unusual for the Liberals to earn a fourth term. The last time it happened was 20 years ago in somewhat similar circumstances, 3 terms for Jean Chrétien. They were all majorities, by the way, not minorities. And then Paul Martin squeaks through a minority in 2004. This time around, it's a little bit different. You're going to have a potential, if the Liberals win, a majority, 2 minorities, and maybe another majority if the trends hold. But that really is predicated on the extent to which people believe that Mark Carney represents not just a change from Trudeau, but also a change from the kind of Liberal government people were so tired of over the last 2 years, or 4 years, really.
Shachi Kurl with the Angus Reid Institute. We will keep talking throughout the program, but we have so many calls. I want to go back to them quite a bit as well. 888-416-8333 is the number that Evan Matthews has called from Liverpool, Nova Scotia. Hi, Evan.
Hi, how are you, Ian?
I'm well, super late on the East Coast. What are you doing still up?
Night owl.
I'm a night person.
Okay.
Fine.
All right. So what did you think of the debate?
I would say that I thought Prime Minister Carney won the debate. You know, he was cool, he had humor, and demonstrated really a masterful grasp of, facts and policy that I think and was able to, in doing that, gives confidence in his ability to execute his very ambitious vision for the future. I also think that Jagmeet made a very strong case for himself and for the NDP as a party to hold the balance of power in a potential minority situation. The NDP has spent the last 2 minority governments, or the last minority government being a very, very effective advocate for working Canadians, and also he showed that he was not afraid to go after the powerful and go after people who seek to victimize others. I was unsurprised by Poilievre. Just kind of, the same stream of canned lies, and it really shows the sort of inflexibility and uncreativeness of that current crew. I also found in his demeanor it really brought the term Darvo. It really broadcast Darvo to me.
Well, I don't know what Darvo is.
I'm Googling.
It's a manipulation tactic that's used by people who do emotional abuse.
So one of the things I would say here, and it's actually going to be one of the strengths of our program tonight, is that we're going to hear lots of different perspectives. And we're going to be reminded, I think, that the lens through which people see this debate will obviously have an impact on what they see. And Evan, it sounds to me, and there's nothing right or wrong about this, but it sounds to me like you went into this leaning very much towards voting Liberal and definitely leaning away from any possibility of voting Conservative. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, like the Conservatives, to me, represent a threat to Canadian national security. To me, they appeared as a Republican fifth column.
So let me just jump in and ask this. So you were motivated enough to watch this debate, relatively late in the evening and still stay up and call into this program. Was there anything that Mark Carney could have said or done tonight that would have led you to not vote for him?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I am not a single party or even a lifelong Liberal voter. My vote in this particular election is predicated on denying the Conservatives a seat,
right?
Because of my deep distrust for them and also because of their articulated policy goals that Poilievre does not really necessarily say out loud in situations like this because he has the tendency to just kind of repeat his scandalized. But in terms of what they write down, it very much mirrors what you see being enacted south of the border.
Okay, let me just jump in there, Evan. I so appreciate your call, but I do want to hear from other people, and we have so many other people calling, so I'm going to leave it there. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Have a good night.
This is Cross Country Checkup. I'm Ian Hanomansing. We're live from CBC Vancouver across the country on the CBC Radio Network, 888-416-8333. That intake of breath you heard is Shachi Curl.
Hi.
Who's the president of the Angus Reid Institute. And did you want to say something, Shachi?
I think that per my comment off the top of the show or earlier in the show where I said, I'm not sure how much this is going to move the needle. What I have heard so far from our very articulate and enthusiastic callers is that so far this sounds like for each of them it has been a confirming experience rather than a persuading experience.
Which is fine.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
So there's no criticism around that, but it does speak to the nature of the way this debate unfolded and was set up, that lots of time and space for the leaders to talk, but what I observed was they were largely talking about positions they've already entrenched. There wasn't a lot of knocking anybody off of their comfortable talking points.
Yeah, which, for people like us, political observers, it's exciting to watch that moment, that clash between John Turner and Brian Mulroney. It's exciting to see a moment that may have changed an entire election campaign. But on the other hand, maybe there's something to be said about giving candidates an opportunity. I mean, there was risk there, right? They could have had those moments, but there's something good perhaps of getting candidates in. They weren't allowed to have notes, so they could have been scripted by memory, but certainly not reading off a piece of paper. We get to see them in the wild.
And as we talked about it, for people who have not tuned in before and have not been able to follow every moment of the campaign, there's actually a process in public service and in education because they get a sense to really understand where a lot of these folks are at. The challenge, of course, is always around accountability, right? And the thornier aspects of, this position, how do you defend that, or how do you and we both know that true debate is not only sort of stating your position, but being able to defend it through one or two or three lines of call it attack or challenge. Nonetheless, I do think that this isn't necessarily going to be an exercise in persuading a lot of voters. So to that end, we've got advance voting starting tomorrow. So you've got leaders now who have made their best case, who have either convinced people who are already inclined to vote for them or left people cold, who knows. But now they have to pivot from that persuasion factor to actually pulling their available voters.
I want to play another excerpt from this debate in just a moment, but first I want to go back to calls, 888-416-8333 on Cross Country Checkup. What's your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Jay Guthrie is in London, Ontario. Hi, Jay.
Hi, how are you, Ian?
Good. We had a caller earlier, I don't know if you heard him, who was talking about it started, he talked about crime and safety being important, but then he talked about addiction issues. And then there was a woman from Humboldt, when I asked her, because she says that crime and safety is important to her, she's a Poilievre supporter, and I said, in what way is that an issue in Humboldt? And then she was talking about addiction and fentanyl. You are an addiction counselor, so that is one of the lenses through which you watched the debate. And what did you see?
Well, contrary to your, I believe, kind of first caller there, Poilievre did not win by any means. He was fairly typical, in my opinion. This guy, he's just so out of touch, and I just don't see, just using an example he said Canadians under some Liberal policies have suffered, and use it in past tense. Well, no, we're still suffering, working class Canadians, I think, we're still, it's not good out here. And so my role in addictions counseling, we run there are safe supply programs, which is, it's providing drugs to addicts who otherwise would be using fentanyl. And it's the studies, the preliminary research coming out is really hopeful. And and he has taken a direct attack at this program and saying that we're going to be, making, putting Canadians in, we want to bring them to rehab.
So let me just jump in.
No rehab beds.
Yeah, I mean it's an important issue, Jay, and we've done at least 2 shows on it, and we'll do more. It's something that I personally think needs a lot of attention. But let's talk about the debate for a moment. Before the debate started, had you made up your mind?
Yes.
And can I ask for who you're going to vote for?
Absolutely, my boy Jagmeet.
Okay, so you knew that before. Did you watch the full 2 hours of the debate?
I did not. I caught the last hour of it. So
and so it didn't change your mind at all. Is there anything that surprised you at all from any of the 4 leaders?
Not really. Yeah. I kind of agree with a lot of your commentators that have been talking about it. It was just a fairly run-of-the-mill. There wasn't anything that stuck out to me. It was fairly,
So one last question, Jay, and there's no judgment at all in this question, but given that, the way you feel you're committed to your party, to your, I think you said my boy Jagmeet, given that, I'm just curious, why did you watch the last hour of the debate? What were you hoping to see?
Well, I mean, I just like to be. I'm literally losing sleep over this particular one because I am concerned about us being under a conservative government. That's my politics. I know that there's a lot to be. There's many differing opinions, but just hearing Poilievre take these direct attacks at pretty much what is, a very real problem for Canadians. I mean, addiction, it's affecting almost every family, and fentanyl is it's dangerous, and I just think he's too idealistic.
Yeah. So listen, Jay, and again, it is such an important topic, but I do want to get to other callers on the debate. But let me ask you one last thing. I think there are a lot of NDP supporters across the country who are going to vote Liberal, or at least they've told pollsters they're going to vote Liberal, because they want to make sure the Conservatives don't win. Are you concerned that voting NDP might actually split the vote on the left in your riding in London, Ontario?
No. I don't know. Okay. I vote for the person, I guess. I mean, it's always just happened to be NDP, but yeah.
You mean you vote for the local candidate, or did you mean the leader?
The leader. The leader, yeah.
Okay.
The leader.
Jay, thank you very much for your call. I really appreciate it. Right. And the next time we do a show on addiction, I hope you give us a call.
Absolutely.
Okay, 888. Yeah, thank you. 888-416-8333 is our number, and this is your opportunity to speak to listeners all across the country here on the special edition of Cross Country Checkup. What's your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? You can also go to cbc.ca/aircheck, either to write your comment down or say, hey, man, give me a call. I'd like to be on the program as well. Well, as promised, let's listen to another excerpt from tonight's debate, and it involves NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. It was an opportunity for him to make his argument to Canadians as voters try to, as the party tries to secure as many seats in the House of Commons as possible. Here's part of what we heard from Mr. Singh pushing back on Mr. Poilievre's housing record.
Mr. Poilievre had the opportunity to show us what he could do. He was the Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper, and during that time, guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes during that entire time. This is not something you can trust to build homes. He built 6 homes.
200,000.
And this has been confirmed again and again. He built 6 homes. That's it. Now, the problem, though, with Mr. Carney is, well, he's laid out a plan. The problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision to buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when Mr. Carney, you profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Poilievre first, Mr. Carney second.
First of all, Mr. Singh, the Toronto Star, the Toronto Star debunked your falsehoods.
No, it was 6 homes, and
I appreciate neither Liberals or NDP are very good with math, but in that year, the year I was the minister, if I could,
which is great.
The year I was,
let's let him answer.
In the year I was,
high enough, though.
The year I was minister, we had 200,000 homes built, and guess what the average price of a home was at the time? $450,000. And
guess what happened?
And one bedrooms rented out for $900. And that's since that time, housing costs have actually doubled under the Liberals.
They doubled
and now we have
too.
Let's bring back Shachi Kurl, the president of the Angus Reid Institute. As you hear that exchange, Shachi, what comes to mind?
Couple different things. First of all, it was a good run on part of Jagmeet Singh, whose party, despite some of the very enthusiastic callers we've had, party's in a little bit of trouble. It's in a lot of trouble at the moment, down to single digits. Largely predicated by left of center voters, traditional NDP voters, running over to the Liberals in an anybody but conservative ABC or anyone but Poilievre situation. That has been profoundly problematic for the NDP. And so here's Mr. Singh not only making an attack on the Conservatives, but seeking to remind voters and viewers that the Liberals are not, he's trying to make the case that the Liberals are not necessarily any better under Mark Carney. And if you want someone to sort of vote head versus heart and vote on true gut values, that's where the vote should go to him. And that's something that he had to do both nights, last night and again tonight, was to really go for broke. He had the luxury of being the leader with the least to lose. When you're down to the single digits, and Mr. Blanchet, yes, he's in an English debate. Yes, there are Anglophones in Quebec. However, almost every question really had for him, his response was around, well, Quebec is a partner to the rest of Canada as though it was already a separate entity and not really engaging on a lot of the national policy issues. So if you're Jagmeet Singh, and by the way, if you're Jagmeet Singh on the day or the day after you've been handed the greatest gift by the Debate Commission in kicking the Green Party out of the debate, you've got a lot more room to maneuver, and he was taking those chances for sure. Now, on top issues, what's been very interesting over the course of this campaign, and I hope we have a chance to talk a little bit later about the lack of discussion around healthcare, because it was the one thing that Canadians really identified as wanting to hear more about. 70% told us that they wanted to hear more in this campaign about healthcare. Was not a specific topic in this debate. But what's been remarkable is the campaign started with all of this anxiety and understandable national freaking out about Trump, about annexation, about tariffs. And what we've seen over the last 4 weeks is that level of anxiety and the level of importance that Canadians are ascribing to that issue has trended down. What's trending up? Cost of living. Inflation, housing affordability. And those two issues are related. When auto manufacturing plants start to close, it's a Trump thing and a tariff thing, but now it's a household wallet, bread and butter, how am I going to feed my kids thing.
I have a question to ask you about that, and we'll come back to it. And I should point out, the regular cross-country checkup on Sunday, we're going to have two topics, and the topic in the first hour is going to be exactly on cost of living issues. So good for us that we're on top of this emerging issue.
You're all over it.
888-416-8333 is how you can take part in this post-debate conversation. I'm Ian Hanomansing in Vancouver with Shachi Kurl, who's just across the table from me in Studio 10. You can also text a comment to 226-758-8924. That text number is 226-758-8924. What's your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Blake Taylor is in Winnipeg. Hi, Blake.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, good.
Good.
I enjoyed the debate.
And did you watch the full 2 hours?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's a pretty important election, I'd say.
Yeah. No, listen, I have a memory, and I wish I could remember what year it was, but I was taking a 1 hour long flight, and I was at the Vancouver airport, and I saw some people crowded around a TV, and I thought, oh, it's got to be a hockey game. And it turns out it was the beginning of a leaders debate. And when I landed, maybe I went to Calgary or something, but it was a short flight. There were people gathered around a TV at the Calgary airport, and they were watching the debate. I love when that happens, and I hope we find that the ratings tonight were terrific as well. Did anything you see or hear, Blake, change your mind?
Well, I thought that each of the four contestants, if you want to call them that, candidates, made it pretty clear the difference between them and what the positions are. But the thing that really struck me was the difference in the kind of people they were. I was sort of disappointed and shocked by the interruptions. I mean, I thought something more substantive, I thought, about what he was saying. But, Mr. Poilievre's interruptions, they really struck me as rude. It struck me that there was a difference in the kind of person we're dealing with here, that Mr. Carney seemed like a diplomat, like a controlled person, like an adult. And I was very disappointed in particularly Mr. Poilievre's behavior and interrupting. It struck me that, if you're not prepared to listen when you attack someone and then they try to answer it and you won't listen to their answer, there seems to me something deeply wrong about that in terms of just human interaction.
Yeah, not only do you make a good point about interrupting, but it's a clever technique on a call-in show, because I'm sitting here thinking, do not interrupt Blake. Do not interrupt Blake. So have you made up your mind who you're going to vote for?
Well, there's an independent candidate in my riding, and so I have reasons to vote for him. I think that actually Mr. Poilievre at the debate convinced me that he's not really the person for the job, because I thought that his behavior was kind of rude and childish.
But it sounds like
his solution sort of simplistic.
Yeah, but it sounds like you wouldn't have voted for him anyway, no matter what he had done tonight.
Well, I do have respect for the notion of limited government and individual freedom and picking yourself up by your bootstraps and so on. And also sympathy with the NDP idea of, we've got to help the vulnerable in society with social programs and prevention of crime rather than punishing crime. So I sort of see both sides of that. Yeah. So it's not that I have no sympathy or empathy for some of the conservative values.
Blake, let me ask you one last question, and then I'm going to move on to the so many calls that we're getting at 888-416-8333. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What I'm about to say is not something I actually believe, but I'm going to ask it to get your response. You're thinking of voting for the independent candidate. Aren't you wasting your vote?
Well, some may say that, but I think it says something when an independent candidate gets some votes. I would like to see some independent members of Parliament, actually. There's certain, I like our system, but there's certain limitations when you're married to a party that maybe prevent you from always making the most intelligent decision on an issue.
Yeah, you sound like a very thoughtful voter, and I appreciate that, Blake, and I appreciate you calling us tonight. And I also think it's important to vote, and every vote counts. And some of the people who are in ridings where they pretty well know that a certain candidate, depending on where they live, is going to get 60%, 65% of the vote, and they wonder whether they should go in and vote at all. I think they should, because, as I say, every vote makes a statement. 888-416-8333 is our number here on Cross Country Checkup. It's the call you can make to make your statement about the debate tonight. Julie Lafleur in Ottawa reached us via cbc.ca/aircheck to say, in my view, Mark Carney won these debates, not only in the content of his answers, but in how he carried himself. That being said, I thought it was nice to see Singh and Blanchette give the impression at times that they would actually work quite well with Carney on some issues. I wouldn't mind seeing more NDP or BQ after this. Tom Riddell on Aircheck from Burlington says, I'm angry that the politicians didn't talk about the Canadian disability benefit and how it's underfunded. They talked about affordability. Well, currently the benefit they're proposing is $200, and we have to have a disability tax credit to get it. Provincial governments didn't protect the disabled, and they didn't lift us out of poverty. And Benjamin Buchanan is in Dutton, Ontario, and on Aircheck he wrote, I'm a master's student at Western University and lived in rural Ontario for most of my life. I found the threat that Mr. Trump has made against Canada to be extremely concerning. From the debate, I found Mr. Carney and Mr. Blanchette the most prepared and ready to fight back against Mr. Trump. And that's a good opportunity to go back to Shachi Kurl. When you last spoke, you mentioned that the Trump tariff issue as a kind of specific issue may have receded a little bit in the polling you're seeing, and affordability has risen, but also that affordability is tied to an extent to the impact of tariffs. And so my question to you from a polling perspective is, does that mean that if people see a certain party being strong on Trump, they will also see that person being the best candidate to make things more affordable? Or do they see those as two different issues?
It's interesting. I mean, a number of things can be true at the same time. And sometimes in political conversations, with the collective we have trouble accepting that two things can be true at the same time. What do you mean that? It's like, no, our heads don't have to explode. So what's been remarkable about the lean into Mark Carney and the way the Liberals have rebounded and surged and eaten so much of the NDP's lunch, and in Quebec eaten a lot of the Bloc's lunch, has led people to not only support the party on the Trump issue, but then there is a commensurate halo effect. So who's best on cost of living at the moment? Mark Carney. Best PM? Mark Carney. Who do you give credit to for canceling the consumer carbon tax? Never mind that Pierre Poilievre spent 2 years relentlessly campaigning on that one issue. Who do Canadians give credit to for that? Mark Carney. So there is, as I say, that elevating effect for the leader of the moment. But as the campaign has gone on, we also see, and, frankly, we're running out of time. Like 10 days, yes, is an eternity in politics, but with advance voting underway, there's not a lot of time to change too many more minds. And in some ways, it starts to look as though Pierre Poilievre on issues such as cost of living, where he was such a natural leader in a matchup against Justin Trudeau, is now having to chase and having to try and make up for lost ground. But the opportunities for the Conservatives to try and pick up some of that lost ground has to do with the fact that when we're focused on what we perceive to be cost of living or household wallet issues or bread and butter issues, even if they're caused by Trump or driven by Trump, it's more the focus goes back to, can I make rent? What's my mortgage payment looking like? Can I still afford, baseball and piano and basketball for the kids? Those are the things that people come back to, regardless of what's driving it.
Shachi Curl with us for the remainder of this special live post-election debate issue of Cross Country Checkup. 888-416-8333 if you'd like to tell us how you felt about the debate. What was your highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Daniel Doherty is in St. John's, Newfoundland. Hi, Daniel.
Hey, Ian, how you doing?
Good. Do you work overnight? How come you're calling us at this late hour from St. John's?
I've been watching the debate and keeping up with everything.
Fantastic. Well, I love the fact that you've given us a call. So what did you think?
Oh, boy, that was an interesting debate for sure.
Yeah.
It was nice to see all four of them be civil, especially where we've been watching the American debates, and those are just yelling competitions between the two candidates. But between the four of them, except for a couple interruptions from the NDPs and Poilievre and Carney, no, for sure, everything was super civil, and happy birthday to Blanchet for sure.
Yeah. And so you watched the full 2 hours, it sounds like.
Yes.
And so, question I've asked some of the other callers, why? Why would you devote 2 hours of your time to watch that debate?
I'm a younger voter. I'm only in my 20s, but I've been watching politics for years and years now, and it's something that affects me directly because I am the next generation that really has most of the say in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's important for younger people to be the ones who are really involved in politics and keeping an eye on the issues that are important to us moving forward in the future.
Yeah, that's terrific. And so Pierre Poilievre looked straight to the camera and he spoke straight to you, Daniel, and said that young people have lost the opportunity to buy a house and he's going to change that. Did either that moment or any other moment help sway your vote?
Between all the major parties, I do believe that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are the ones who will be the ones to focus more on young people
mm-hmm.
and affordability issues like housing, groceries, gas prices. I feel like they have more of a plan going forward for dealing with these issues that have been coming up in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And so you're in Newfoundland and Labrador, where like a lot of traditional Liberal territory there, but it wasn't feeling that way 6 or 8 months ago, and I think it's starting to feel a lot that way now. So has that been frustrating for you as you've seen support for the Conservative surge in your province, and then it seems to be waning a bit?
Yeah, so I feel like there are more younger people who are listening to the Conservative side
mm-hmm.
out here in Newfoundland. It's just harder for that to be heard when there's a lot of generational liberals here as well. So we kind of have those two sides
yep.
towards us.
What's interesting, though, is that I don't know if a lot of people in your age group were watching tonight, but I feel like you, over the next few days, are going to be spreading the word that you liked what you saw and maybe trying to persuade some of your friends to vote the same way. And I think a version of that is going to happen all across the country from supporters of various parties. So that'll be very interesting. But Daniel, thank you very much for staying up past midnight to call our program.
No problem. Have a good night, guys.
888-416-8333 is our number here on Cross Country Checkup. And we'd love if you would contact us online at cbc.ca/aircheck. When you do that, you can leave a comment or you can say that you'd like to take part in the program and gives us an opportunity to give you a call back. cbc.ca/aircheck. I'm going to give you one other way to reach out to us, and it's our text number, 226-758-8924. What's your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Let's go to Manitoulin Island in Ontario, and David Hilliard is calling. Hi, David.
Good evening. How are you guys today?
I'm doing really well. What did you think of the debate?
It was very eye-opening. I was listening to the debate, actually getting the municipal hall ready for the early ballot election tomorrow.
I'm
a municipal worker. I work for a local municipality as a janitorial staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're getting the halls ready for that. And
nice.
He's headed over to the elections officer. And I'm 38 years old. I've been voting Conservative my whole life. And for the first time, I think I may actually have a swing vote and might be voting Liberal.
Why?
I found the perspective that Mr. Carney was presenting on the needs to break away from the dependence on the United States. It's a pretty big topic right now with, the cost of tariffs, the cost of living. And it didn't seem like Poilievre had much of a real response when they were getting into the discussion about how they were going to try and fight to save Canada from being taken over as the 51st state.
And what were you looking for? It sounds like you were listening, I guess. What were you listening for today in the debate that, I don't know, would either kind of underscore how you already felt or maybe possibly change your mind?
Well, I never thought that I would see the day where the Liberals would actually cancel the consumer carbon tax. Traveling home, filling up gasoline in my car, it was $65 normally to fill up my little car, and today it was $40. And that $25 of savings to pass down for paying for soccer and paying for basketball and kids programming and for the cost of groceries and living, it seemed to be like every time Poilievre and Carney got into discussion, Poilievre kept debating as if he was talking to Justin Trudeau. Well, Justin Trudeau wasn't in the room. He wasn't debating with Trudeau. And I felt that Carney really kind of put him in his place and said, like, I am not Justin Trudeau. I'm a different leader. I'm coming with different perspective. I've never thought I would ever hear a Liberal leader even talk about cutting services or cutting taxes or finding a way to balance the budget. It's very rare to hear Liberals ever talk about balancing a budget. That's normally very conservative thinking. And, my thoughts just to the whole way of reviewing just the concerns about housing and cost of living. I mean, I was lucky enough to buy a house in 2019 on Manitoulin Island with making about $17 an hour. You couldn't do that now. And I think Carney's got just a different vision, and we need a strong leader to bring Canada forward and to change kind of the direction of where we're going.
David, our producers, I guess you told our producers that you come from a conservative family. So if any of them are listening right now, what are they thinking?
They'll be absolutely shocked. They'll be absolutely shocked. The one thing that I was concerned about, though, was and what kind of flipped my vote was I would have thought Poilievre would have backed us more on the hunting discussion. I mean, Carney did talk about how they banned 2,000 firearms. I am a hunter. I do fish. I do duck hunt. I do goose hunt. That's one of the best things about living on Manitoulin Island is we do have migratory birds that do land here. There's a lot of farmers here. And, I do like the ability to go and buy, a semi-automatic shotgun to duck hunt and goose hunt. And I would have thought Poilievre would have said more about standing up for the hunters and those that hunt and fish, but he didn't hardly say anything. Safety is a concern. I do understand that, we do deal with a lot of the issues with fentanyl. It's very big. Being on Manitoulin Island and being with First Nations communities, it's a big issue. Carney seemed to have an answer for every question, and Poilievre just seemed to basically blow off the questions and then refer back to 10 years of this and 10 years of that and never really come up with a solution to basically come up with a better answer.
Okay. Listen, really interesting hearing your perspective. You got the town hall ready for the advance vote tomorrow?
That's right.
Okay.
It's all ready to go.
Excellent. Good to hear. All right,
David. I guess there's 1,000 ballots waiting to be filled out. Somebody's listening to this. If you're young and you've never voted, this is your chance to make change. I think this could be the most critical vote we've ever seen in my lifetime in Canadian history. It's so close.
David, that's a perfect nonpartisan public service announcement to get people to vote. So I endorse your message. Thank you very much.
Have a great night, guys. Thanks.
888-416-8333. Our live post-election debate cross-country checkup is your opportunity to tell us what you consider your debate highlight, if there's an issue that you felt didn't get enough attention. We're going to hear from Rob Russo in just a moment, but let me quickly read some of the reaction we're getting on cbc.ca/aircheck. Gulrez Harif, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from Calgary, wrote, Poilievre made it clear that problems like housing and inflation started long before Trump and are tied to Liberal policies. A new PM doesn't mean real change if the same team and ideas stay. I'm a new citizen doing well here, but even people like us feel the pressure from poor immigration planning. Dan Prue in Kitchener, Ontario, on AirCheck says, both Carney and Poilievre had a good debate, but it won't change my voting decision. I just wish Mr. Poilievre would act as civil as he did tonight when he's in the House of Commons. Daniela Gonzalez wrote on Air Check from Drummond, Quebec, as a 36-year-old Venezuelan immigrant voting in my first Canadian election, I believe Mr. Singh should be our Prime Minister. Unfortunately, he hasn't gotten the rightful support, but he blew me away. 888-416-8333 is our number here on Cross Country Checkup. I'm Ian Hanomansing, live at CBC Vancouver. And let's go to Rob Russo right now, Canada correspondent for The Economist and a former parliamentary bureau chief for CBC News. He's in Ottawa. Hi, Rob.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
Doing really well. So how do you think our colleagues will be covering tonight's debate? What do you think the headline might be tomorrow?
Well, if it were me writing the headline, it would be very boring, but it would be a felicitous one. I thought both tonight and last night were excellent debates. I thought that there was a minimum of babbling from the Tower of Babel. So I thought that was great. And I think, nobody knows. I mean, everybody likes to ask political journalists who won a debate. And I never answer that question because you'll get the answer that you rarely get from someone like me, Ian, and that's I don't know. And we almost always get it wrong. People just decide over the next few days over their family gatherings who's going to win. They'll discuss it. They'll look at clips and highlights, which are very, very important, far more important now than they were even all those years ago when I was a baby bureau chief, because of the way people receive the clips now. For instance, I can guarantee you that the Conservatives will cut an ad based on Mr. Poilievre's lachrymose, I thought, tearful closing statement, which I thought was reflective of what Mr. Poilievre was trying to do. I defy anybody to examine Mr. Poilievre's debate performance against his leadership foes, primarily Jean Charest 3 years ago, and compare them to the same person who was on the stage tonight. Because one of the questions I had after last night and tonight was, who kidnapped that Pierre Poilievre? Where is he? Because someone put him in hiding. He's not the same guy anymore. So those are some of the things that struck me.
Yeah, is that a good thing or a bad thing, do you think, for Poilievre and the Conservatives to have played such a different role tonight than the role that he played that got him here?
Yeah, I don't know that the substance was that much different. If you listen to what he said, it's pretty much what he's been saying for the last little while. The tone was very, very different. Usually he's a bit of a bulldozer in debates. He asks rhetorical questions, demands a yes or no answer. And when anybody tries to give him a nuanced answer, he steamrolls them. That guy's disappeared. And what it tells us, and again, I go back to that statement at the end when he talked about how what a privilege it was to travel the country, kind of an interesting question about what regrets all the leaders had. And they all pretty much said the same thing. But Mr. Poilievre showed rare lifelike tendencies. He showed emotion. And he got emotional when he said it was a wonderful country to visit in this manner and to talk to people about what animated them. I guarantee you that's going to be an ad.
It was an advantage, I got to say, in that debate to have that final question to be the third or fourth person who got it, right? So I don't know that Blanchette was really ready for the question, but by the time it got to Carney and Poilievre, they had some time to prepare. And the question was if they had any regrets. It's kind of like the job interview question, what's your biggest weakness? And it's like, I care too much.
That's right.
And it's like, what's my big, that I didn't get to see every Canadian or more Canadians, and both Carney and Poilievre. Actually, it was Jagmeet Singh who first said it, and the other two echoed that. Well, you talked about clips from the debate. Some will be edited into ads. Some will be massaged in social media. Let's play a couple of longer excerpts, Rob, and I'll get your reaction or analysis to them. So let's start with Pierre Poilievre targeting Mark Carney, as he did throughout the debate. Here's one of the lines of attack that we heard.
Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much. The biggest risk we have to affordability, the biggest risk we have to this economy is Donald Trump. So first and foremost, we've got to get that right. Secondly, we need to do it in a way that brings everyone along together.
Rob Rousseau, what do you make of that exchange?
I'm afraid you're going to have to help me with that one, Ian. I didn't get it. I can't hear program. I can hear you, but not the program.
Okay, well, so that was where that was in an interesting. It was interesting because in a way, it was different than a lot of the debate, because this is where Pierre Poilievre said that you have the Justin Trudeau staffers with you, and then he said. You're writing the talking points. They're writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone, and Carney kind of made some sounds there, disapproving sounds, and it's about as, I guess maybe not abrasive, but maybe as aggressive as Poilievre was in that debate.
Now I actually had that written down as one of my highlights from the debate, and I'll tell you why. Mr. Poilievre did spend a great deal of his attack time going after Trudeau. And this has been a strategic error that's been pointed out by Conservatives themselves. Mr. Trudeau is gone. Mr. Carney has stolen much of the Conservative platform and appropriated it to the point where polls give him credit for bringing an end to the carbon tax, rather than Mr. Poilievre, who's been campaigning on it for years. So I thought it was interesting that Mr. Poilievre did this. I thought it was interesting as well that Mr. Carney chose mirth and chose to say with a kind of a smile on his lips that, no, I write my own talking points. There is some truth to the fact that Mr. Carney is surrounded by former Trudeau advisors, but those advisors, and I'm thinking principally of Gerald Butts, I'm thinking of Bruce Anderson, they pretty much broke with Mr. Trudeau over the last couple of years. So they would have disagreed with much of what Mr. Trudeau did over the last couple of years. Again, though, it tells me that Mr. Poilievre was probably hoping to expand beyond his base tonight. And his base is rock solid, 37, 38%, some of the highest numbers that the Conservatives have had in the modern era of this iteration of the Conservative Party. Stephen Harper has the highest right now at 38.6%. But if he's going to do it, he wouldn't do it with this kind of line of attack. If he was going to do it, I would say he would do it more with the things that he said at the end of his remarks this evening at the end of the debate.
So we didn't have a John Turner, Brian Mulroney moment here, Rob, but you described this debate as being one that you thought was very good. So when you think back to all the debates that you've either covered or watched before you were covering debates, where does this one fit?
I think it makes us all the big winners. Because we did get a thorough airing of some serious topics. I thought we would spend more time on the threat that Mr. Trump represents, but we spent adequate time. We did have some of the issues over the last 10 years that have bedeviled Canadians, primarily affordability issues, well aired as well. If you're going to ask me who the big loser was, I can answer that one. I rarely answer who the big winner is, but the big loser tonight was clearly the Debates Commission. Even though they put on a fine debate, they don't put on the debate. That was really the CBC who put on tonight's debate, and Radio-Canada in Montreal as well. But the Debates Commission is going to have some very, very serious questions to answer because of what was a shambolic attempt to try and get alternative agitprop media in under the guise of Rebel News, and then to have to cancel the media scrums with leaders afterwards because of what they called a security issue. Again, a failure. I thought they were courageous in barring the Greens, even though it was at the last minute. They probably should have done it earlier. That took some courage based on their own rules. but their failure to identify the date for the French language debate coinciding with the date for what is an official religious holiday in the province of Quebec, when the Montreal Canadiens are getting into the playoffs. That was another failure as well. So,
although to be fair, now you're talking about something I know about. To be fair, probably very few people, when the debate was scheduled, thought that was going to be such a pivotal game for the Habs.
Oh, Ian, now you're talking about something I know about. I had my sacred magical sweater hanging in my closet for just this evening. I knew that it was going to come down to this. I put on the sweater, and that helped pull them through. I hope somebody gives me proper thanks for that.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll give you thanks for, Rob, is one of the best things about working for CBC and covering an election is the briefings that you used to take part in. You are a very, very wise, analytical person. And I'm heading to Toronto for election night, and I'm sad that you won't be part of those briefings. So
I'm afraid that I have to inform you, Ian, that you're wrong. I will be there. I will be doing some work for CBC Radio. And I look forward to seeing you as well, because you were one of the few people whose eyes didn't glaze over. You were actually listening.
I did. Okay,
so
well,
I look forward to seeing you in about 10 days.
All right, Rob, thank you very much, and thanks for speaking with us tonight.
My pleasure, Ian.
Rob Rousseau is the Canada correspondent for The Economist, former parliamentary bureau chief for CBC News, though it sounds like we haven't gotten rid of him yet. We reached him in Ottawa. You are listening to a special live cross-country checkup as we look back at the leaders' debate. And actually, we can look back at both leaders' debates if you watched the French language debate yesterday with or without translation. Our number is 1-888-416-8333, or you can go to cbc.ca/aircheck. Shachi Kurl from the Angus Reid Institute is here with me in studio. But let me get a couple of calls in, and then we'll go to Shachi again. John Muller is in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. Hi, John.
Hey, and how are you doing?
Good. How'd you feel about the debate?
Well, I found it pretty interesting, and like a few other folks have commented, it didn't really move the needle too much, but it certainly did help flesh out some of the, the wider platforms of the various individuals.
Mm-hmm. And so it didn't change who you're going to vote for?
No, I'm in a pretty safe Liberal riding. I'm a sometimes NDP voter, depending on where I'm living, but in this instance, I'm quite confident that I'll be voting for the Liberals.
Yeah. So who's your MP? Who's the incumbent MP in Wolfville in your riding?
It would be Cody Blois, who's our new cabinet-level Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development. So that's a new move as of the Carney prime ministership, so I feel like that's good for our region. And I've spoken with him personally after he returned some of my emails about concerns I had with the U.S. humanitarian crisis, and his willingness to speak with me on that issue gave me a lot of encouragement to support him.
So you have a Liberal in your riding, you like him, you're going to vote Liberal. So let me ask you this. Let's put Mark Carney aside for a moment.
Sure.
Was there anything from the other three leaders that you liked?
Yeah, I certainly appreciated when Jagmeet Singh was stepping up to Poilievre and his disinformation, when Poilievre was spouting off various, half-truths or full-out lies about crime or things of that nature. I appreciated that Jagmeet was able to step in and correct him, and that made me feel, a bit better about the NDP. Honestly, I'd had a bit of antipathy towards them since the whole pulling out of the confidence and supply agreement fiasco. That was a big blow to my support for them. And for this debate, part of what I was watching for was whether or not I could even support the NDP at any level in this election, or if I still would encourage my friends in NDP competitive ridings to vote for them. And after the showing that Jagmeet did, I feel, I think if your riding has a chance of electing an NDP MP, then it's a person worth voting for.
And how did you feel about the debate as a debate?
Well, I felt that Carney showed a lot of calm competence, which is very on brand for him. He sort of likes to show himself as someone with experience and competence, and I thought he was unflappable, really. He fended off the attacks from the other leaders with relative ease. It was pretty impressive. I watched the French debate as well, and there he was a little less confident, of course, in the language, but I also thought he did quite well. I felt in both debates that the other leaders interrupting backfired massively, and sort of gave them an air of obnoxiousness, which I think is very much against the Team Canada vibe that we're looking for right now. So every time another party leader, whether it was Poilievre or Jagmeet or any Yves-François Blanchet, when they interrupted Mr. Carney, it made me like Carney quite a bit more.
It's already Friday morning on the East Coast. John, thanks for staying up late and giving us a call.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing I thought was quite unrepresented in the debate was the overall U.S. humanitarian crisis, especially as it pertains to queer and trans people. What I've spoken with Cody Blois before was about how we should change our Safe Third Country Agreement and accept U.S. refugees and asylum seekers. And I think, for instance, if Donald Trump is willing to hold the state of Maine hostage over a few transgender people in sports, what would happen if he were to say, I will remove all tariffs on Canada if you will persecute trans people? I certainly don't think that Poilievre would stand up for vulnerable Canadians, but I do believe Mr. Carney would.
Okay, John, thanks for your call.
Thank you.
888-416-8333 is our number here on Cross Country Checkup. We are, of course, live and very interested in getting your call. You can also go to cbc.ca/aircheck to either say you'd like us to give you a call or you can leave a comment there. Bob Katowski is in Fort Frances, Ontario. Hi, Bob.
Hello, Ian. And I just, first off, I just want to appreciate all the work that you are doing and, your producers and your staffs. It takes a lot of effort and time to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So what did you think of the debate?
Not much surprised me with the debate. I kind of felt like Poilievre won the debate, but I was kind of predicting that he was. I mean, he's got the experience of debating. So it kind of felt like that. I'm about as much confused as I could be for who to select this year. I recently moved to the district, so the MP that I had before, I would have easily supported. I supported the person and more than the party.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that would have been the PC candidate. However, now, 2 years ago, I knew who I was going to vote for. 6 months, I knew who I was going to vote for. But since the resignation of our, former prime minister, now I'm still leaning going back to Liberal. So it's a confusing time for me.
And so given that Justin Trudeau stepped down and that kind of precipitated your being uncertain who you'd vote for, is it that as you lean Liberal, is it because you're leaning towards Mark Carney or leaning away from Pierre Poilievre?
It's a little bit of both. So the Poilievre vote would have been a vote against Trudeau and his policies, not so much the current Liberal policies as they are now.
Yeah.
So that's why it was that vote. I had an opportunity to meet Mr. Poilievre, a lot of the same talking points for the last year or two. And unfortunately, those talking points aren't as relevant as they were before.
So
for me,
have you made up your mind?
I have not. So my position now is to probably vet the parties through their online websites, what they're really focused on. I would personally love to be able to see a budget from each one of them to find out what they would like to do with our money.
I love the fact that you're as diligent a voter as you are. And sometimes when people call in, especially on political things, I think in the back of my mind, like, are they really... do they really believe what they say? There's no question that you sound like you really do believe what you're articulating on the program. And I appreciate you calling us up, Bob.
Yeah, well, and, and the other point of why it is important is this election is going to cost Canada $570 million. So if we divide that by the number of eligible voters, I think we're each in for about $20. So it's kind of worth researching for.
Okay, get your $20 worth, Bob.
Get my $20 worth, yep.
888-416-8333 is our number here on Cross Country Checkup. Lots of calls. So what I'm going to do is pick up the pace with those calls as I go to you. So keep that in mind. But before I do that, let's go to Shachi Kurl from Angus Reid Institute. I don't have a specific question for you, but you've been listening and emoting and just want you to weigh in at this point.
Yeah, I don't have much of a poker face, do I, Ian?
You do not.
I think what I find very thoughtful and what I'm struck by are the number of issues, which is not a surprise to me, but it's you really see it sort of leap to the forefront. The number of specific issues that individual voters care about, well beyond the stuff that we talk about on the CBC or the things that show up as top issues in terms of what people are talking to pollsters about. Voters often vote on a single issue that may not register or may only register in the single digits, but it can be particularly locally or in terms of their own lives, an issue that's profoundly important to them. So what have we heard about? We've heard about fiscal discipline and spending and balancing budgets. We've heard about gender issues. We've heard about mental health crises and addictions. And so these become the issues that I think aren't often as well canvassed as they could be over the course of campaigns, because in the times we live in the society that we live in the media atmosphere, and that also speaks to social media, all of that really is benefited by simple, repetitive messaging rather than having a crafted stance on X and Y and Z, because also that takes away flexibility from politicians and from their parties, their advisors, whoever writes the talking points,
that's right.
to pivot. Right? So, the name of the game is always stay loose, like try not to walk yourself into a corner. I think one of the other takeaways that I've heard about, I heard it a little bit from Rob, and I know you want to get back to the lines, but also from the callers, was really around the comportment of Pierre Poilievre today. And we heard that over the last couple of nights, he's been a bit more subdued. And in part, Poilievre has found himself in a really unique and perhaps unpredictable situation. If there is a Greek narrative, if there is narrative of a Shakespearean or a Greek drama here, you have the hero who all of a sudden is in a situation where he risks being who blows a 20-point lead, a 20-plus point lead. And to be fair, he didn't blow it, so to speak, but he got lapped by the coalescing of the center-left in Canada behind Mark Carney. And a big part of Poilievre's challenge has traditionally been the gender gap, the fact that guys, men of all ages, love that pugilistic, prosecutorial, aggressive style, and it just turns a lot of women off. And it is the reason why his net favorability has been in the negative territory for a long time. So yesterday, we started to see a calmer, more subdued version of Poilievre. But the big question is, with so little time left in the campaign, when you have a brand that has been running for as long as Poilievre's has, for 11 years or for 2 years or however many, where do you start the clock? It's a little bit challenging, and some might even say inauthentic, to try and change that now. But clearly, that's what he's trying to do.
Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute and knows a lot about gauging what voters out there are thinking and what motivates them. And anyone listening to the program today, this live edition of Cross Country Checkup, is getting a good sense of what voters are thinking. And Shachi, I got to say, a couple of things I'm loving about this program tonight is, as you identified, not only that people are talking about the issues that motivate them, but also the ones who are partisans are very open and honest about that, which I think is interesting.
Is that a departure?
Well, I just sometimes when I hear partisan voices on a political topic, I'm a little suspicious about how, did they come in, with kind of blinders on already, or, is this really the way they feel? And today people have been very honest about how they came into the debate. And so I say the other thing that's been great about this program, and it's kind of a hallmark of this program, is that we can have this thoughtful conversation about, at a time when people are so angry and polarized, and the scrums were canceled after the debate because of how raucous things were. We can just have a conversation on this program. And the conversation continues at 888-416-8333. Okay, let's hear from a lot of voices across the country. It's 8:13 here in the Pacific time zone. It is 12:13 in the Atlantic time zone, and you can do the math for the other 4 time zones in the country. We really love the fact that you're listening and love the fact that many of you are calling in, including Tim Gaffney, who's in Terrace Bay, Ontario. Hi, Tim.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing well. What was the highlight of the debate for you?
It wasn't much of a highlight because I don't think we should be voting for the leaders of the parties.
Right.
We live in a democracy, and I live in Thunder Bay area, and Patty Hadji was our representative, and she is amazing, right? And that's who I vote for because she is the voice of our community, right?
And what party is she?
Liberal.
Yeah.
She is the Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
Oh, okay. You know what? I didn't pick up on the name. Okay, I got it. Yes. And so, yeah, right. So, you know, I mean, you yes, technically you vote for your local candidate. And, but I mean, it's also very reasonable for somebody to be motivated by the party leader. That's still part of our parliamentary democratic process.
Yeah. Well, the leader, Mark Carney, I believe is the only one that can deal with Donald Trump because he's an economist. But that doesn't mean that I support the liberal viewpoint.
Yeah.
I vote for my local representative because she represents our viewpoints.
Yeah. And
this is what democracy is about.
Sure, but like, so I'm not disagreeing that that's a completely legitimate reason to be motivated by your local candidate. I would just say that, you know, a democracy and a parliamentary system also can include being motivated by who the leader of the party is. But anyway, thank you very much for your call, Tim. Let's go on to Nick Capra, who's in Toronto. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for taking the calls and doing this tonight. It's a great show.
Yeah. And so did you watch the debate tonight, Nick?
Yeah, the whole thing, and quite disappointed. I went into it pretty disappointed because I have been a Green Party supporter, and not hearing their voice kind of disturbed me. But I gave it a shot and listened to the others, and I was further disappointed because I didn't think I just become a grandfather for the first time, and I'm quite concerned about my grandchildren's future. And climate change was not brought up at all tonight. And I think that's what the Green Party could have brought to the table tonight as a discussion. You know, we signed an agreement, the Paris Accord, and in that agreement, we were supposed to keep global temperatures at 1.5 degrees. And by 2030, and it's 2025, and we're here. So the Green Party would have brought this up because this is a huge threat to our future and our children's future, and it's not being talked about.
I mean, climate change did come up a little bit, right? Like I remember,
and it was quite disappointing because you know, it was the same old. But you see, the Green Party would have come up and given you different options for Canadians to hear, and there's nothing wrong with hearing other ideas. You know, it doesn't matter where a good idea comes from, and that's the Green Party's approach. And unfortunately, they were the only ones that were left out to be able to use that kind of collaborative style of politics.
I mean, I guess
representation was not even talked about tonight. You know, our electoral reform, which, you know, should be something so key to our country and to the people of our country to make this our systems more representative. You know, the best we can do is a minority government, in my opinion. So I'm really hoping that the NDP picks up the numbers and we get another minority government, because that is much more representative than a liberal or conservative majority government.
Okay.
That, you know, so. So people, please don't give up on the Greens. Please go out there. You supported them before, especially if you care about your grandchildren's future, seniors particularly.
Okay. Nick, thank you very much for your call. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
888-416-8333 is our number. Valerie Livingston, I love the fact we're getting so many calls from the East Coast. And Valerie, you're in Cape Breton. How are you?
I am. And it's a beautiful, beautiful night in Cape Breton. Nice enough to be out on the step.
Nice.
Oh my.
That's fantastic. So tell me, what was the highlight of the debate for you?
Well, I don't know if it was a highlight, but it was an insight for me. I think that one of the first things we're going to see after the election is that Jagmeet Singh will create a coalition with the Liberals again.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing for you?
I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great because it kind of keeps the party in power a little bit in place. They have to weigh the other parties, their coalition parties, views and thoughts with their decisions.
And so, what did you see? What did you see in the debate tonight that kind of made you feel good about a potential coalition?
Well, I felt like Jagmeet was almost, and I'm sure he would say, don't use that word, but picking up for Kearney against Poilievre. When Poilievre would say things against Kearney, for instance, he said, wait now, I just lost that thought.
That's okay.
Anyway, he would say something against Poilievre and the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
The pipeline. It's going to be 14 years before you can do a pipeline, and you said you were going to do this, and you said you were going to do that. You didn't do anything. And right away, Singh spoke up and said, what do you mean? Yeah. They bought a pipeline and they built a pipeline. They did both. So they did both. That's not true.
Yeah.
Valerie? And I thought there was a lot of tonight, that's not right.
Yeah.
More than when you watch the Americans or others, they're fighting. But tonight it was just putting people on the spot, on the spot a little more.
Thank you very much for calling on this beautiful night in Cape Breton, as you described it. And one of the things I appreciate about your call, Valerie, is that this is kind of like a focus group on this program. You get to hear all these people with different perspectives on what they saw, and that kind of dynamic between Jagmeet Singh and Mark Carney was not something I picked up on. So it's interesting that you saw that, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
And something about Poilievre, all along I felt that his only platform was Trudeau. Trudeau's a bad guy. Trudeau did this. Trudeau did that. And tonight I found on that his only platform was that Trudeau did this. Trudeau did that. Well, as Carney said, Trudeau's gone.
Yeah.
He's gone.
All right, Valerie, thank you very much for calling.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
All right.
I enjoy the show. Great.
Thank you. 888-416-8333. If you'd like to tell us what you thought about the debate, what you considered the highlight, if there's an issue that you didn't think got enough attention, or you can go to cbc.ca/aircheck. That's what Arish Walla did in Brampton. Hi.
Hi. Hi, Ian.
I see you're a first-time voter. Are you excited about casting a ballot?
Yeah. My birthday was in March, so I couldn't vote in the Ontario election.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited to vote in the federal election.
And so did you see anything tonight that either changed your mind or made you even sure of the way you were leaning already?
Yeah, I think it changed my mind. I was originally, before Trudeau resigned, I was going to vote Conservative because I think we needed a change. And then when Carney came in, I found myself really interested in his experience. But I think this debate showed that Pierre was more than just slogans, and he had a plan for the country and for young people. And that really attracted me to his platform.
And so are you're decided now that you're going to vote for Pierre Poilievre?
Yeah, I'm going to head out tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And I see in the notes here, and when you were talking to our producer, that your parents are staunch NDP voters. This reminds me a little bit of a call we got earlier from somebody also in Ontario who's from a Conservative family. He's voting Liberal. And when I asked him how his family would feel about his revealing that, he said they would be shocked. What would your parents think? I don't know if they're listening right now, but what would they think of your choice?
That's why I'm a bit quiet. They're actually asleep right now. But, my parents have voted NDP. They actually voted for Jagmeet Singh, and for when he ran for MPP in Brampton. But my parents, when they watched the debate today, they were extremely turned off by Jagmeet's constant interruptions. during the debate, and I think they shifted towards voting for Pierre rather than Carney.
I mean, that's a pretty big shift, especially if it is prompted by interrupting during a debate. Like you really think they're going to go all the way from being, historically NDP supporters to voting for Pierre Poilievre because of how Jagmeet Singh conducted himself in the debate?
Yeah, my mom, she's a educator, and she found she said something that was really interesting to me, that Jagmeet kind of reminded her of students that were interrupting her while she was teaching in class, and I think that kind of turned them off, and I think they're probably going to vote for Pierre. Now, they have been talking about Pierre. They've been talking about how he's kind of more, like pro-union kind of, and also pro-stopping immigration, those types of, like not stopping, but like kind of limiting and making it more better for Canada to adjust before bringing in people that we can't, handle, especially in Brampton, where we have a lot of international students where they're kind of, suffering under the system that the government has created for them.
Mm-hmm. And what about the tone that Pierre Poilievre has used, not tonight, but, as he became the Conservative leader and when things were going really well in the polls, really aggressive, lots of slogans. Did that appeal to you?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think in Parliament, he really turned me off, but I found that there was no alternative when Trudeau was in power.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Carney came in, I found an alternative where we had a smart, educated person that could really lead our country towards better times, especially in the face of Trump. And Pierre was kind of like sloganeering always, and he was like slow towards adjusting towards the Trump tariffs. But I think this debate showed that Pierre actually does have a plan. He is much more in line with the mainstream response, the tariffs. And I think if when Pierre aligns in those issues, and he aligns much more in my issues in terms of housing and affordability, I think that kind of secures my vote for Pierre.
Okay. Thank you very much for calling.
Thank you. You too. Have a good night.
888-416-8333, our number here on Cross Country Checkup. I'm Ian Hanomansing. We're live in Studio 10 at CBC Vancouver. Let's take a look at some online reaction. Carlos Probst from Ottawa texted us. That text number, by the way, is 226-758-8924. He texted, the highlight for me was when Blanchette suggested that regardless of the election outcome, the leaders should meet immediately afterwards to coordinate a response to the American threat to Canada. While I do not support the BQ's ideology, I found this a true sign of leadership and a great call for unity from a separatist, no less. Michelle Zip from Edmonton went to cbc.ca/aircheck to write, Singh's performance has convinced me to vote NDP. He underlined how important it is to have a compassionate voice in Parliament for ordinary people. He was especially strong on the housing issue. Both Carney and Poilievre will not create solutions for lower income people. Diana Coulthard from Kelowna texted us, after watching the debates, I feel confident in Prime Minister Carney's ability and plans to lead our precious Canada through the present crisis and beyond. We will never be the 51st state. Cynthia Milton from Lasqueti Island here in British Columbia says, going into the debate, I was seriously considering voting strategically, but coming out of the debate, I'll vote for the NDP. Singh spoke directly to core concerns of housing, health, affordable living, solid employment, all things that are part of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. He did so with facts, stories, humor. I would have liked to have heard more in the debate specifically on the climate crisis. Lots of calls, but I want to go to Shachi Kurl just for a moment here, the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Shachi, two things I just wanted to bring up. One is we've had two young men. They said they were young, and they're both Poilievre supporters, and that is part of kind of what the polling shows is that is, and so just really interesting. And the last caller saying that that his parents, who are NDP supporters, kind of see Poilievre as a supporter of unions, which is also something that I don't think people would have thought about the Conservatives 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. And then the other thing I think is interesting, and of course this is an incredibly unscientific sampling of opinion, but there are some people who are saying that they're vote switchers and it's based on what they saw during the debate. Do you buy that?
Well, I buy it from the people who are telling us that that's what they intend to do.
Yes.
Are we going to see that in significant enough numbers to have an impact on the campaign dynamics? I was emoting in a happy way, in a smiley way, listening to some of the callers talk about the interplay between Singh and Poilievre, and how Singh in some cases was quick to push back, correct the record, or take the fight to Poilievre. Really important for everyone to remember that there's always politics at play here. I'm sorry, everyone. I know we've heard from such thoughtful, idealistic callers today, but a good night for Jagmeet Singh represents a good night for Pierre Poilievre, because the Conservatives need the NDP to do well so that left of center vote splits again or bifurcates again and enables the Conservatives to take that vote split and try and run with it. So it will be very interesting, and it will come down to the head versus the heart, the gut versus the strategy. And we've heard from some callers tonight who say, I think I'm going to vote my gut. And I think people should always vote their conscience regardless. However, the big question will be, if there's an inevitability to a Liberal win, and I'm not saying there is, but if people start to feel that, it may empower them or embolden them to actually vote their conscience, which could change the dynamics right at the end. On the other hand, if they still perceive Poilievre and the Conservatives to be strong, and they are motivated to stop a Conservative government, then I think you're going to see that coalescing continue to happen. So let's see whether what we're hearing in our very thoughtful focus group tonight actually happens in the aggregate across the voting population.
Yeah, I go to the CBC poll tracker every day. It aggregates kind of credible polls and skews them in a good way towards recency, right? And it was maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe as many as 3 weeks ago, but certainly 2 weeks ago, on their probability, the numbers were gaudy for the Liberals. It was like sort of 80% probability that there would be a Liberal majority, and maybe like a 12% possibility it would be a Liberal minority, right? And sometimes the numbers were even higher than that. And I thought, yeah, if people were motivated on the left, and the middle and the left, to keep the Conservatives out, they might start thinking, to your point, maybe I don't have to worry about voting strategically anymore because the Liberals are going to win.
And turnout is a really important factor. We've seen over the last 15, 20 years, some really dismal voter turnout numbers, as low as 58% of eligible Canadian voters. The last time we saw a higher watermark was that seminal 2015 change election from Harper to Trudeau, the height of sunny ways and Trudeau mania. And we saw voter turnout peak in recent times at just over 68%. I think we're going to see higher turnout than we have in the last two elections when we ask Canadians, do you think this is an important election or not? The fact that nearly 80-90% of Canadians tell us it's either more important or way more important than the 2019 and the 2021 elections is very telling. And high turnout will be an interesting character in this story.
Although nothing motivates voters more than getting rid of a party, getting rid of a leader. And I wonder how many supporters of the Liberals feel the change has already happened.
The motivating factor this time, every story needs a villain. If this was a telenovela, like who's the guy twirling his mustache and showing up in every scene and making the heroine cry, that's Trump.
Mm-hmm.
In this election, the main character who has been responsible for driving so much of vote intention, it's not been Pierre Poilievre. It's not even been Mark Carney.
Mm-hmm.
It's been Donald Trump.
Yeah. Who we didn't hear a lot about tonight, which kind of surprised me. Okay, let's go to the phones, 888-416-8333 or cbc.ca/aircheck. What's your debate highlight? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Mike Waring is in Collingwood, Ontario. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Ian, how are you?
Good. I see that you describe yourself as very proud of all the leaders for putting on a wonderful debate. That is a fantastic sentiment. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's, in the state of polarized politics, we had a wonderful debate where every single leader spoke what they had to speak. and we all listen to them. So I'm just asking Canadians, just get out there and vote.
Mm-hmm. I love that, Mike. You know what? I love the political process. I think voting is important. I think good debates are important. I think respectful campaigns are important. And I'm glad that that's something that, at least tonight in the debate, you felt was important as well. Did anything you saw or heard today change your mind at all about who you're going to vote for?
No, that'll never change. I was just, like I said, very proud to be a Canadian.
Yeah.
And when you listen to all four leaders speak, every single one of them did it. They gave their chance, and get out and vote.
Fantastic, Mike. Thanks for calling.
You're very welcome.
Lev Kushnarev is in Montreal. Lev, how's your last name pronounced?
Yes, hi, it's Kushnarev.
Perfect. Okay.
Hi, Ian.
Hi. So what did you think of the debate tonight?
So I watched the debate. I also watched the debate in French last night, and I thought that overall, it was a good debate. I'm a political junkie, so to speak. So for me, I would have liked a little bit more content. The main highlight for me, I would say, was at the end when leaders actually got to ask questions from each other, even though most of them asked questions from Carney, except for Carney himself. And I think that, I would like to have that going on a little bit longer. I would like to have that be more of a focus of the debate.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting part of the debate. The only thing I didn't like is towards the end, I think some of the question askers ended up giving speeches instead of really asking a question. So we lost what could have been a really good back and forth.
And I think that would have been less of a problem if there was a little bit more time dedicated to that portion.
Yeah, unless politicians are really good at eating time, right? So if you'd given them, they had 3 minutes, and then some of them left very little time for a back and forth after they asked a really, really long question. Anyway, that's just me, Lev. Had you made up your mind before the debate?
So I've actually been doing a lot of research, and my research mostly is reading. So I've been reading a lot of books. I've read Mark Carney's book, actually. I finished it last week, 2021 book called Values. And that's a book that I really implore any listeners to pick up a copy and read. He's our current prime minister, and he's very likely to be our next prime minister as well. And I think for me, I have friends and family who are on all sides of the political spectrum. And I think that for me, as a person who is a little bit younger, I actually share a birthday with Yves-François Blanchet. My birthday was yesterday as well. I turned 28.
Happy
so 32
birthday.
years younger.
Yeah.
Thank you. For me, I think that the Conservatives are a little bit of a clearer choice in this election. I voted for Liberals in the past, and I've really, we had a great representative in my riding before. Marc Garneau was our representative in Montreal, and I've met him a few times, and I believed in his vision. But I think that, unfortunately, the Liberals have not made life easy on the younger generation. So that's why I'm leaning much more towards the Conservatives, but I want to see the platforms released before I make my final decision.
Wow. Again, I mean, two things come to mind, Lev. First of all, that you are so committed to kind of looking through the evidence and making the best choice you can. So that's very impressive. But you are yet another young man who, in your case, is leaning conservative. So what is it about Pierre Poilievre that reaches you?
I don't even think it's about him personally. I'm a big believer in ideas over people, and I do see how a lot of people can see that he's that he's a bit like Trump, that he has like a mean demeanor, although he has not shown this tonight in the debate. But I think it's much more about cost of living, affordability, a sensible immigration policy. I'm an immigrant myself, and I think that, this is something that is wonderful. But I do think that we just need to, make it so that we build infrastructure in this country in order to accommodate new immigrants. When I came in 2007, I was a child, and the situation then was even much better. Schools were less crowded. There was more family doctors per capita, more hospitals. So that is something that I think is an important aspect. I also thought that in the debate they glossed over the Century Initiative, which I think is not such a good idea for Canada personally.
Yeah.
I think that it's something that we need to be careful of.
Yeah, listen, I've got so many more calls. I need to get to them. But Lev, I'm going to ask you a question, and you have to promise me you'll give me an honest answer, okay?
Sure.
When you were watching the French debate last night, did you flip it off early to then watch the Montreal Canadiens game?
So actually, funny enough, because it was my birthday, I flipped it off a little bit early because I had to actually have dinner with my family and celebrate my birthday.
Fair enough. Well, how could anybody disagree with that, Lev? Thank you very much for calling. And once again, belated exactly. Belated happy birthday to you as well.
Thanks so much.
All right. Now, here's an interesting perspective we're going to get, and it's about the debate itself. Arsalan Gaemi is the head debate coach at Fostering Debate Talent Academy. That's a debate and speech school for high school students. One of the coaches as well of Canada's national high school debate team, and he joins us from Vancouver. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking part in the program. And so I'm curious, as somebody who looks at debate from a very technical standpoint, what did you think of tonight?
Yeah, I'll say two things. The first is in terms of basic textbook debating, I think Mr. Poilievre probably had among the stronger nights of the men on stage in terms of just a very sort of strong, concise display of his positions. When challenged by interruptions, he pushed through very strongly. He sort of made all the points that he wanted to make. He answered some of the difficult questions well and confidently. Whereas Mr. Carney, I think to some extent demonstrated some of his relative inexperience, right, with this sort of format. And he kind of talked the way a normal person who maybe doesn't have that kind of debate training speaks. The important difference, though, of course, is that, you know, it's not a high school debate competition. And so it is unclear to me whether the average Canadian voter particularly cares to elect someone they see as the best textbook high school debater, or if they are, you know, entranced by Mr. Carney's casual technocratic style.
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it on both of those points, and that, you know, you don't necessarily become prime minister because you're a good debater. But were you disappointed that we didn't have any kind of magical debate moments tonight?
I mean, I'm disappointed as a debate coach, right? Because that's exciting for me and it's something I could show to my students.
Yeah.
However, you know, as a citizen, which is perhaps a more important job than debate coach, I enjoyed that to some extent. There was some real clash of positions and we saw some substantive differences between folks rather than too much theatrics.
Is there any advice you would have for the debate commission? Because I think they're going to get a lot of advice from people on a whole bunch of different issues, that anything that you'd like to see them do maybe next time around to make it more, to create more clash and more debating opportunities?
Right. So, I mean, I think in their defense, many of the criticisms came from things outside of the actual immediate debate itself, right? So I think to a large extent, the debate format was pretty good. I do think some of the interruptions are damaging and are off-putting. I've heard some of your caller-ins talk about that a little bit as well. So avoiding some of those. I also think in the type of debate we do, I have 16-year-old students get up and speak for 8 minutes eloquently, and that gives them the space to make multiple complex, nuanced points. I do think trying to stuff everything you're saying on Indigenous issues or on pipelines or whatever in a 1-minute snippet that then you clip for social media probably contributes to a less nuanced perspective. So perhaps less interrupting, a little bit more time to speak to get a deeper and more valuable contribution from debaters.
Yeah, but then the problem, of course, here you have 4 individuals as opposed to maybe 2 teams of 2 people each. So it's hard to get that. I thought the moderator, who's a friend of mine, so I'm biased, I suppose, but I thought Steve Paikin did a really good job. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm a Steve Paikin fan. I feel like if your listeners don't watch him on TVO and his long form interviews and stuff, they're really excellent, and they should. I thought the French moderator was really excellent as well. So I think one of the things that the debate commission nailed was really quite good moderation on both ends. And I think they did a good job of dragging out information and making sure broadly the debaters stayed on topic. But also, you don't want to interrupt too much, because the point is that you don't want to be the news, right? You want to make sure that you let people speak and let some of their own personality come out while they're speaking.
Yeah, and I saw Steve interviewed by David Cochran on CBC before the debate, and he said he wanted to be like a referee in a hockey game. And he said if the day after a big hockey game, you're reading about the referee in the news, that was a bad game for the refs. So he hoped to, go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a huge American football fan, and this season, I don't know if you're a fan, there was a lot of NFL refs in the news, which is bad news for the league, right? So I think it was good that they kept themselves out of it.
One last thing, you talked about the interrupting in a disapproving way, which I agree with. But if you were to give sort of general advice to either a specific leader or all the leaders from your perspective as a debate coach, what would it be?
I think the piece of advice I would have given to Mr. Carney is to understand that while he has this technocratic style that is very appealing, that in a debate, the other competitors are not speaking to each other, right? They're speaking to the audience. And so trying to technocratically explain something, at least for some viewers, may come across as not, being overrun by your opponents. And so maybe in a few key moments, right, such as when he's questioning Mr. Poilievre or when he's being questioned by all three people at the same time, standing his ground a little bit more and making sure what he's trying to say comes through as clearly as he wants it to.
Yeah, he also didn't have his eye line right, where Pierre Poilievre did. In other words, Mark Carney spent a lot of time looking at the moderator off camera and then kind of glancing on camera. And it reminds me actually from a debate context. When I was in school, I learned, I don't know what they teach people now, but look at the judges. You don't really, you kind of pay lip service to looking at your opponents, but you're trying to convince the judges and you need to know where you're supposed to look. I don't know how you felt about that.
No, exactly. That goes to the question of experience, right? So Mr. Carney did it the way like a normal guy who doesn't have debate training does it, right? Like normal human behavior is not to look at a camera and speak to the audience. It's to speak to the people who you're engaging with.
Yes.
Whereas a little bit of more experience would make someone know some of those tips and tricks that you're mentioning that you learn in a high school debate class.
And be less normal, I guess. No, that's not what you're saying. All right.
It's up to them to decide. Yeah, totally.
Arslan, really nice talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Arslan Gaemi is the head of debate at Fostering Debate Talent Academy here in Vancouver. We have about less than 15 minutes left on this special post-debate edition of Cross Country Checkup. We're live from Studio 10 in Vancouver. Clearly, you have people listening right across the country, across all 6 time zones, which is fantastic. Our number is 888-416-8333. You can also go to cbc.ca/aircheck. And our question, what was the highlight of the debate to you? Is there an issue that didn't get enough attention? Is there anything that happened today that either surprised you or maybe nudged you one way or the other in terms of who you are going to vote for? Jack Hallman is in Toronto. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good. So you are undecided. Are you truly undecided, Jack?
I promise I'll tell you at the end. After yeah, and I'll contribute to your demographic survey. Okay. I'm also a young man.
Okay, there you go. And so what did you think of the debate?
Well, I'll give you my highlight at the end too, but I mostly have a complaint. The debate was mostly fine. I just have an issue that wasn't talked about I want to mention.
Okay.
So I'm a high school teacher. I teach law here in Toronto. And the last week I've spent with my grade 12 students, we've been talking about medical assistance in dying in Canada and our laws around it, because it's a 2015 Carter v. Canada famous court case, and we kind of go from there to talk about it. And there's been the changes in 2021 since, right? So the Liberals made that change in 2021 as a result of a Quebec court case to expand medical assistance in dying to people that aren't immediately about to die or foreseeably going to die. And in 2027, after several delays, as the CBC's covered very helpfully from my class content, they're going to expand that to people with mental health conditions, which, as I've talked about with my students, is a very serious thing that potentially has the ability to affect a lot of people with disabilities.
And so let me just jump in and say, this is a sensitive and important issue, and we actually did an episode of Cross Country Checkup on it, which people can find on the CBC Listen app, and we had Yeah, it's just there's a lot to talk about here, and I don't want to give it short shrift, but I do want to get through.
Yeah, I'll make my point.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mainly just I'm disappointed that no parties mentioned it in their platform at all, except the Bloc a little bit. They want to pass something in their provincial codes around it. But no other party said anything about it. I haven't heard about it. And disability and payments weren't talked about in the debate. I think another caller mentioned that. I'm just disappointed that it hasn't come up at all.
So we've been asking people if there's an issue that didn't get enough attention. So thank you for saying that or mentioning that. Now, let me ask you about the debate itself. Did anything happen that perhaps changed your mind?
I'll give you my highlight, actually. Then I'll tell you who I wish I could vote for.
Okay.
My highlight is less serious. My highlight, I have lots of critiques of Mr. Carney and his history as a central banker or whatever. And I did appreciate once that Mr. Francois Blanchet had the nerve to go, last I checked, Brexit happened. Because Mr. Carney likes to brag about being in charge during Brexit, but I don't think Brexit's gone very well for the UK. So
although I think his point may have been that he helped steer England through the problems with Brexit, right? Not that he managed to. It wouldn't have been his job anyway, as the Bank of England governor, to avoid Brexit. But once you have Brexit, then you have to figure out how to go ahead with the economy in that situation. Anyway, that aside, you're still undecided.
Are you truly undecided?
Shachi's asking you the key question.
Your producer got it out of me. If I could choose the party I want to vote for, I'd be voting for a different CPC as a young man. If the Communist Party of Canada was running in my riding, that's what I'd be voting for.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we don't have one in my riding. I'll probably vote for the NDP, but I think the Liberals are going to win.
Okay. Shaq, thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
888-416-8333. We're at that time of night when not a lot of time to get on the program. So I'm really going to speed up the pace of the calls now. So let's go to Tara Wallace, who's here in British Columbia in Squamish. Hi, Tara.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear. What did you like about the debate tonight?
Okay, so I liked that it was really civil, and I thought most of the answers were extremely thoughtful. But I will say I'm coming into this election, of course, probably like the majority, thinking about how Canada can position itself in a new world where we're not so dependent on the U.S. for trade. And I think about it from the perspective of resources and energy, of course. So I think when I think about Carney and the critique against him from the Conservatives, a lot of people within the energy sector, especially in Alberta, you often hear, of course, like, keep it in the ground, Carney. And I think that, some of Poilievre's topics today, or the critique of what he was saying around, like, the Eastern Pipeline, was the Liberals' fault. And I just think, like, his comments and critiques are so basic, and they don't take into account the industry as a whole. Like, if you were to look at today, for instance, and the price of oil, like, to think about what our neighbors are saying down south, like drill, baby, drill, like that's not very attractive to the commercial industry right now to build, to build new operations. Yeah. But I also think that from Carney, he had a really great opportunity to talk about what Bill C-69 is really about. And I think that all legislation is complex, it's regulatory, it has a lot within it, but I think it is the job of a leader and a good communicator to be able to take what is complex and make it simplified and talk about the benefits of why it is a legislation. Yeah. And I think he had an opportunity to talk about streamlined review processes and the climate alignment as a market advantage, because he does talk about those things, but he needs to talk about them simplistically in a way that really conveys value to the populace. Yeah. And I just think he kind of like missed the mark on that a little bit. And it was a little bit disappointing because it's important. This is an important topic. And he should have known he was going to get that question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your call. And I'm going to, unfortunately, Tara, keep it short because I want to get at least one more call in. But I appreciate you phoning us here on Cross Country Checkup. We go from Tara in Squamish to Tara in Rossland, British Columbia. Tara Robertson, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. So what'd you think of the debate tonight?
Well,
I felt it went off very well. I felt everyone behaved nicely, and they all had some good things to say. I was particularly impressed with some of the changes that I see in the NDP government, even though I'm a conservative.
And when you say changes, what do you mean?
I just feel the direction that he's going is good for Canadians. The change that would come about from NDP versus potentially a continued Liberal government would be positive. Sorry, my kids are interrupting me.
That's okay. And so did anything happen so you said you're a conservative. Did you see anything tonight that either made you sort of more certain that you're going to vote for Poilievre or less certain?
Well, I think Poilievre has been consistent throughout all of his campaigning and again throughout his debating this evening. And, I feel like nothing too much has changed. I heard some callers saying that. I think he's a solid guy. He has a clear vision. He knows what he wants to do, and he knows that we need change. I'm not so certain that the Liberal can give us that change. They've had a bad track record, so I do feel like I would support the Conservative government, though I liked some of the things the NDP government had to say, and that's a change for me.
Tara, you're an interesting person. That's and you reflect, I think, a lot of voters, particularly in the interior of British Columbia, right, where there's some ridings where there are the ridings, at least, if not the individual people, will switch between Conservative and NDP. Thank you very much for calling the program tonight.
All right. Have a good night.
Okay, 3 minutes, Shachi, is how long we have. And, so many interesting things tonight. One of them is the number of people, and the last two callers did this, who cited the politeness, the tone of the debate as something that they really liked. And I liked hearing that. What is your thought on that?
Well, I think in an era and a time, and we saw this actually in the first Trump era as well, that the bombastic, chaotic, at times unbelievable tone that Trump takes creates a situation, particularly on this side of the border, where the expectation around the comportment of our politicians from Canadians is you're going to straighten up and fly right, and you're going to be polite. You may have very different and profound cleavages around your issues and the substance of what you believe in, but there is an expectation, especially in times of chaos or especially in times of extreme disrespect, that Canadian politicians are expected to do better. And I think they met that mark tonight.
You can be civil and you can still debate fiercely. We didn't really have fierce debating today, but let me just make it clear that I'm not saying that we should be Pollyannas and just let people roll over you, but at least there was a level of decorum there, high level of decorum. I think that we heard a lot of people really appreciated that. 90 seconds left. You can make whatever closing comment you want.
I will end tonight where we started, which is now let's take a couple days to breathe and see where all of this really settles. I think we heard, I was, and we talked about this, blown away really by the depth and breadth of our callers tonight and the different issues that they're engaged in and what they care about. And now we really have to see how this settles. I'll just, for people who missed the top of the show, really important to remind them that, something like 40% of leaning and decided Liberal voters say that they have not fully committed to their vote. They could still change their mind. That also goes for about 25% of Conservative voters. So we have to see in the next couple of days, do people lock in, or are they open to maybe their second choice, which exciting for all of us. More sleepless nights for pollsters. We'll see how we do.
And listen, you aren't going to reveal trade secrets anyway, but how does the polling work, at least for Angus Reid? You said you're actually doing some polling tonight?
We're into field this weekend, so either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. There are other pollsters who would have been into field by phone, which is a very immediate medium, asking immediately anybody who that they can get on the phone to agree to talk to them. Did you watch? How did you feel about it, etc. We have a number of questions that we want to get through with our respondents to not just understand, again, the top level stuff, but what is driving people's decisions.
I look forward to seeing that data, and I always enjoy speaking with you and your perspective on this. Shachi Kurl, the president of the Angus Reid Institute, thank you so much for being with us live in studio tonight.
Such a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad you enjoyed reading my face all night.
It was the easiest thing I had to do. And that's it for this special edition of Cross Country Checkup on a Thursday night. Thanks to everyone who called today. If you'd like to share comments or appear in a future show, you can go to cbc.ca/aircheck. I see a countdown here at 30 seconds. Do I only have 30 seconds before the end of the program? I'll pause. I do? Okay, then I'll get through this quickly. Let's see. Our phone screeners are Bisma Mogul, Andrew Roberts, Ariel Tosman, streaming team Mel Carter, Shivani Joshi here in Vancouver, Gabby Hagorilis, and Matthias Wilson, our technical editors, production assistant Chloe Kim, producers Mark Hennick, Abby Plenner, Kiata Greco, Catherine Zhu, our digital producer, Richard Goddard, senior producer, and I am Ian. See you on Sunday.